Hey, I'm David and this is Adobe UXP Things You Need to Know. Today I'm talking about BatchPlay again and also the Alchemist plugin. So in the last video, and if you've missed it, I suggest you to watch that first because it covers more theoretical grounds on Action Manager, which is a precursor of BatchPlay, and the two of them are deeply linked. Back then, I have left you with the recommendation to go download and install the Alchemist plugin by
Jaroslav Beresa.
As a quick reminder, you can find it either on the UXP Marketplace for free or on this GitHub page. I prefer the GitHub version because due to the Marketplace strict vetting for products, in order to be approved, one feature has been implemented not in the most optimized way, but both of them should work fine. And in case you're not familiar with GitHub, you get the entire repository as a zip, clicking this green button, download zip. And when you've unzipped it, you can point the UXP developer tool to the manifest.json that sits in the dist folder, okay? Now we have the plugin loaded in Photoshop, and let me dock it on the right. So the Alchemist plugin does at least a couple of very important things. It listens and it can inspect. So you have two buttons down here, one for the listener and one for the inspector. Let me start with the listener first. As a reminder from the previous video, you know that each user interaction with the user interface in Photoshop triggers events that carry payloads that are complex objects that describe the kind of event and allow it to be played back in the actions palette. Or if you can listen to the underlying code, you can play it back in your own scripts. And this is exactly what we're going to do right now. So make sure that you click the listener button here at the very bottom. And also make sure that you have listener as the type and category. And you also have this exclude select. These are all drop-down menus that have different values, and we will look at them in a while. So exclude means that all those events that usually pollute the list of events that the Alchemist listens to are not displayed. So they are just filtered out. Okay, now that we have clicked this listener, we can start doing things. For instance, let's duplicate a document. So image duplicate. And let's call this, I don't know what, foo. Okay. So now you see that, well, a document is being duplicated and it's called foo, but we also have this duplicate event here. And it shows up with this kind of display where in the content and tree, you have it displayed as a tree. So with these arrows, you can expand and collapse them. And you see that the event is the duplicate event. And you have the target, the enum is the ordinal. We're referring to a document and we're getting the first one and we're duplicating it, calling it foo, and giving it a document ID of 889. You can inspect the listened code as a tree or in its raw form, which I frankly prefer. So this is a JSON-like object as we saw in the previous video. So you have the event, the target, which is an array. In this case, just one object. So this one document, the name, the document ID, and the command. Also, if you go in this code tab, you see the exact code that you can use to replay this same event. So if you copy this and edit maybe a little bit just to change the name and the document ID, because you cannot have two documents with the same ID, you can duplicate a document with code. I think this is already possible in the DOM, but just for the sake of experimentation, let's do that. So let me copy this, switch to Atom just because it's syntax highlighted, paste it here. We first need to store the BatchPlay function requiring Photoshop action BatchPlay, and then the result is equal to await BatchPlay because BatchPlay is an asynchronous function. You see that it accepts an array, which is this guy here, as we saw in the previous video, with the descriptor, and also an option object, which is this red one, with a synchronous execution set to false, meaning that this is async. This can be true. So in that case, BatchPlay is going to act as a synchronous function, which is something that is not really recommended unless you perform very quick tasks. And modal behavior, well, this is when you have a modal dialog open and you tell BatchPlay what to do. In this case, if there's a modal dialog, it will fail. Okay, so let's say that instead of foo, we want to, I don't know what, moo, and the document ID is going to be 999. Okay, so let me copy everything, and we have to run this code, but we don't have anything to run it into. So let me take the debug console. We're not going to debug the Alchemist plugin, but we're going to just use this console. So let's switch back to Photoshop. Let me minimize the UXP Dev Tool, just the console. At this point, I can paste in here everything, and hopefully this document is going to be duplicated and it's going to be called zoo or moo, sorry, with a document ID of 999. So let's try this. And we have a promise. The promise is resolved. And in fact, you have the moo document here. Okay, so this works. So let's try something else. We have duplicated this document. Let's try with duplicating layers. And you can do that in a variety of different ways. One of which is dragging the layer in the layer palette to this icon, and it has been duplicated, and you see another duplicate event. And if you select it, you see that the target is not anymore a document, but a layer. And each time that you see in the target something that says ref whatever it is, a layer, a document, and then enum ordinal and value target enum, this means the currently active document or layer. So the target is the currently active layer, version 5, no idea what this is, and is command, you can forget about it for the time being. And the option of the duplication is just the dialog option. So we are not displaying any dialog for this duplication event. So this duplicates a layer, but you can do this in a different way. So for instance, you can use a keyboard shortcut, Command J, and this duplicates the layer. But you see, we have a very different event, copy to layer. So let me select that. And you see that the code is once more different. The event is copied to layer here. We don't have any descriptor because apparently this event doesn't need any. And again, the dialog options are don't display. Again, synchronous execution false and modal behavior fail. This is the default. We have yet another way to duplicate a layer. And in this case, with the option key pressed as well with the Command and J. So Command Option J. You have this dialog where you can input the layer's details. So the name, let me call this zoo. And for the sake of experimentation, let's set the color of the layer as blue. Let's change also the blending mode to screen and the opacity, not 100, but 50. Okay, so this time we have yet another event. It's make. And so let's inspect this make that the Alchemist plugin has listened to. We have this object make. Oh, actually, let me copy everything and paste it in Atom so that we maybe see it a little bit better. All right, so you see that the event is make. We're making what? A new, and this is a descriptor. So this is the new descriptor. So we're making a new layer with a name zoo, with the mode that is an enum, a blend mode, and with a value of screen, an opacity, which is a unit, percent unit, with a value that for some reason is not 50, but is with a lot of decimal places, and yet another enum for the color, in this case, blue. We are then using this enum area selector with a value of selection enum. I'm not 100% sure what this means. Probably it says it's the active layer that we're using as a reference. And then copy is true, which is probably what is needed for the duplication to succeed. And again, is command is true and the option don't display. Synchronous execution and modal behavior as the default. So again, you see that the BatchPlay takes one array, which is this thing here, and one option object. That is this one. And if you forget this object, the BatchPlay call is going to fail. If you don't have to modify the default, just add an empty object, right? And that's going to work. So having this kind of code, you can do a lot of things. For instance, you can create a function that lets you duplicate a layer setting all those parameters. So let me try to make this. Let's call this a function like const dup layer. And this is equal to a function with a fat arrow syntax. And this takes everything, okay? So let me put everything inside here, and I want to return this. Return. And since I'm awaiting for something, this makes this function asynchronous. So I need to have this async keyword on the top. So async. Okay, I think this is it. No, actually it's not. I need to be able to set what? The name, in this case this, so name. Let me add it here, so name. And then also the blend mode that goes here. Let me call this blend mode. So blend mode, and then let's add this to the list of the parameters, and also the opacity that goes here. Okay. So name, blending mode, opacity, and then what? Oh, the color. The color that goes here. So let me call this color. All right. And I think this is it. So let me copy everything. This function. Let me check if the BatchPlay. So let me switch to Photoshop first. And let me put the console on the top. Let's clear it. I think that we already have the BatchPlay in memory. Yes, it's native code. So I just need to paste the code for the dup layer function. All right, so Photoshop and then the console. This is the function. And it returns undefined, which is fine because we're not calling this function. And at this point, I can do that. So I can call dup layer, and this accepts the name. And let me call this name Lou. And then what? It wants blending mode. And let me have this a screen as well. Well, of course, you need to know all the exact blending modes so you can properly error check here. I'm just using the one that I have seen works for the sake of demonstration. So screen, the blending mode, and then the opacity, I want in this case 99. And the color, let's try red. That should work. Let me delete this zoo layer so we can start duplicating this background so that I know that the screen works. And let's close this and see what happens. We have a promise that is pending and it's being resolved. And well, actually, I should have awaited for that. So that I should have written await for the dup layer, etc. In this case, this is the reason why I'm getting a promise. The layer has been created. It is red. It has the screen blending mode and the opacity 99%. So it has worked fine. Okay, I think at this point we can get rid of all those layers. And by the way, you can also clean the list from this button here that says clear all, and then you get rid of everything. One last thing that I want to show you is how to bundle multiple steps into one big routine that is called through BatchPlay, because BatchPlay has this unique feature that Action Manager lacked to run an array of descriptors. And then we will wrap this in a function that we will stick in the prototype of a native object, but we'll get to that in a moment. It's really, really cool. So I'm still listening. I'm duplicating the layer. I'm not really interested into this copy to layer event. Let's say that we want to create a luminosity mask on the layer that is selected. So we want to create a layer mask. Make sure that the layer mask is selected. You see all the events here. We're going to look at them in a minute. And at this point, we can apply the RGB content of that layer as normal. Doesn't make any difference because it was white. Normal and multiply are the same, but let's use the proper normal. Okay. So we have those three events. Let me switch to the raw because I rather prefer it. So we have this one. Let me copy it and paste it just as an object here. This is the first one. And then we have the select. And this goes here. Let me call this select. All right. And then we have the last one, which is the apply image event. This descriptor here. So this is apply image. Okay. In the first one, we are creating layer mask. So you see that we are creating a new channel, class channel, and we are sticking that into the mask. And the mask is reveal all. So it's white and not black. And also the select, we're selecting what? A target that is an array, in this case, only one descriptor, a channel, the currently active channel, making visible false. And the apply image event, it's a calculation. You see that you have in the reference a couple of descriptors. So one for the RGB channel, so the composite channel, and the fact that it is the merged view. Preserve transparency true, whatever it is, these are the steps that we have recorded. Okay, so now we can create a function that runs all those three steps at once. So let's call this create Luma, right? So const create Luma mask. I'm not sure if this is properly called luminosity mask or would have required the L channel from LAB, whatever. Create Luma mask is fine for us here. So it's a function. And this function calls BatchPlay. So BatchPlay, and actually it is an asynchronous function. So let's await for BatchPlay, and let's make this an async function. And BatchPlay, you know, accepts an array of descriptors and an option object. So let me use this as an empty object for the time being. So into this array, I'm going to copy and paste all those three descriptors, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so this function should, if I've not made any mistakes, which is really likely, perform those three steps and create a luminosity mask on an existing layer. So let's try that. Photoshop and the console. Let me clear the console and let's paste the definition of the function. BatchPlay should, unexpected token. What am I missing? Oh, commas. This is something that I do a lot. All right. So let me try again. Paste and undefine, which is cool. So back to Photoshop and let's bring the console up. The function was called create Luma mask. So let me get rid of that layer. Let me create another one. And let's see if this works. Create Luma mask. Let's call this function. And boom, it goes. So you have three BatchPlay steps merged into one, and that is going to be way faster than the previous ExtendScript way of calling 3 execute action in a row. But there's something even better. You can, and if you look at this page in the documentation, you can extend the prototype of some of the native object. In this case, in the doc, they are extending the prototype of the document. We're going to extend the prototype of the layer. So let me copy this and show you what I mean. So you can say that require Photoshop app, not document, but we are working on a layer. So layer and then prototype. To the prototype, we're going to add something called create Luma mask. And this is an async function that, in this case, return and await BatchPlay, blah, 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 right? So let me copy this and paste it into the console. Hopefully we have no errors. All right. At this point, let me get rid of the layer, duplicate another one. And at this point, I think I can say require Photoshop. And then I'm going to get the app. And then in the app, as you know, there is something that is the active document and the active layers. I already have this here. I don't need the color. And the active layers, I want just the first one. So the one with index 0. And at this point, I can call the create Luma mask. Is this the correct name? I already forgot it. Create Luma mask. And hopefully this is going to work. Yep. You see now that it's not a function that is independent and lives on its own, but it is a function in the prototype of the native layer object. This is something that we weren't allowed to do with ExtendScript, and it is a nice addition of BatchPlay. And by the way, super cool. So you can really extend the DOM with your own functions. On the one side, you can fill the gaps, so create in BatchPlay the function that the DOM should have or had in ExtendScript but has not yet in UXP, but you can also create your own routines that exploit the possibility of BatchPlay to use this array syntax. So let me get rid of that and let me sum up what we have seen today. So the Alchemist plugin works with two different options. We've seen only the first one, the listener. In the next video, we're going to show the inspector. While you interact with the Photoshop user interface, all the events are listed on this column here, and you can inspect them either in the content or the code. The difference is that the code is added the parts that allows you to just copy and paste them in your UXP plugins, whereas the content is either just the raw descriptor or this tree, which is a little bit more pleasing to the eye. Make sure to have the listener set both in the type and the category, and also this exclude filter, because otherwise, if you have none, you see that there is a lot of junk that we don't really need. You can then copy and paste the code, rework it, wrap it with your own function, or combine multiple events in one single BatchPlay array, and even store them and extend the Photoshop API, assigning your function to the prototype of some of the native objects. In this case, you can extend the Photoshop, the document, the layer, action set, and action. Okay, I think this is it for this time. It came out a bit long, but there is so much to say about BatchPlay and also the Alchemist plugin. First thing that you have to do is go to the marketplace, to the UXP marketplace, get the Alchemist plugin, and make sure that you remember to add a positive rating, because hats off to
Jaroslav Beresa
for his amazing work. I want to thank all the people that have already contributed with a big or small donation. It has really been appreciated. Thank you. There is a donation button either on my website or in the YouTube video description. I also have the usual products on the marketplace myself too. In the next video, we're going to complete this BatchPlay mini-series covering more of the Alchemist plugin. But for now, that's it. Thank you for watching. Bye.